welcome to Behind the Build. I am your host, Jonathan Jacobs, and I ended off the last discussion with this gentleman saying that you know what, we should do a part two, and I'm going to send you a text. And then we were planning the launch of part one, and I was saying we should definitely get part two in the books. So we exchanged some text messages, we exchanged some emails over the last little while, and so sure enough, we've set this up. This is Peter Braithwaite from PB Studio back for part two. Peter, thanks for taking time.
Oh, thanks for having me again.
Yeah, well, we do this on Saturdays because we're both so busy during the week. It just ends up working out really well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Reminisce on dropping children off at programs and then having some free time to be able to do something.
Yeah. It's the only time I can find a quiet space. My house is is pandemonium, and usually the office here is busy during the week. So yeah, it's the only time find some quiet space to do this.
Right? Yeah, I'm with you. So we had wrapped up, and I'll say it almost like, you know, in the previous episode, we had talked a lot about the evolution of the practice. You starting out west as a framer, and then moving out east, and then where you had worked, what you had done, how you established the practice, all of that. And we kind of wrapped up, and you were talking about how you had taken on, like a madman, 2 new educational courses to further your advancement as a learned man.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So the one program was at Calgary, and the other one's at Dal, and the program at Calgary is the first of its kind in Canada. So do you want to, if you don't mind, just like touch a little bit more on like what life looks like taking these courses, what these courses are, how they're going to contribute to your general knowledge base, and how you plan to implement that in some way.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, all of this was kind of born out of, I taught at Dalhousie School of Architecture for 7 or 8 or 9 years. I'm not sure. And it felt very repetitive, and it felt like we're teaching the same canon of architecture. And a lot of it is focused on, mid-century modern ideals and Corbusier and Louis Kahn, and not a lot of, I felt like, new information coming in as disciplinary information. And it was getting kind of exhausting teaching, but also frustrating. I started to get frustrated in that, like this colonial way of design is so intertwined with the way we teach. I felt like I was stagnating as a designer and as a teacher, and I just felt this desire to broaden my scope. And being a biologist, like, studying as a biologist before, I was always interested in the way that your buildings touch the landscape and work with the landscape in the way that, Glenn Murcutt, we use that kind of idiom or saying or whatever it might be about touching the land lightly, and the ideas and concepts around it. But I did feel like a lot of the things we say in design schools, a lot of it hasn't been, it hasn't been proven. A lot of our ideals, a lot of our things that we believe to be true, there isn't any sort of empirical knowledge in the same way that other disciplines in the academic institution test things, especially in the natural sciences. So I guess it kind of bred this in me, like this natural science instinct to, I can figure this out. I can go and do a PhD, and I can think about the ways that I design, and then I could design studies around them, and I could research it in a very qualitative sort of way. And then we'd have real empirical knowledge that can inform the things we did in our office. And I would say that was in a lot of ways quite naive of me, thinking that it would be that simple. So it started out, I applied to do an interdisciplinary PhD at Dalhousie, and I assembled, a committee of architects, landscape architects, and then natural science, conservation biologists, social scientists on my committee. But right away, I started to notice that there's a schism, there's a division between the way we communicate as architects and the way natural scientists communicate. And architects, by our very nature, we're generalists. We have to think of things broadly because there's a lot of things that influence the way we design. It's not just about natural science. It's about human habitation. It's about dwelling. It's about social things. It's about economy. There's just so many aspects that go into it that architects aren't extremely the focus of our, we just have to think of things more generally.
Yeah.
Whereas natural scientists have this inclination to hyper focus on certain aspects, heavy level of specificity. So, I would say, okay, what we need to do is get a site. I'll design a building and then we'll look at it from all these things. And they're like, well, what are you talking about? I would be saying, like, generally the ecological health of the site. And they would say, are you talking about species richness? Are you talking about biodiversity? Are you talking about,
Yeah.
indicator species? There's just, that's the way natural scientists work. So as I was developing that, I was finding, like, is this really a path that I'm going to get something usable for my profession? Because ultimately I wanted to have tools that I felt was in more of a, standing back from it, I wanted to feel a sense of purpose in the work that I did. And I didn't want it just to be, I build, expensive summer homes for affluent people. I wanted to believe that the work we were doing was actually heading in the direction of doing something beneficial as opposed to the opposite. In my second year of the ID PhD, I started looking around at other programs, and Harvard had a Doctor of Design, and then I had noticed that University of Calgary had just started one, and there was the first kind of its kind where it's about a profession of design. It could be landscape design, it could be planning, it could be architecture, and you're trying to create solutions for the profession as opposed to creating solutions for the academy or for knowledge in general. So it's very focused on what's your practice, what's the knowledge base you bring through 10 years of practice or more, and what kind of problems are you trying to solve for your discipline. And that really appealed to me. So I had taken parental leave to have, when my wife had our second son, and I just kind of went and did that at University of Calgary. And then the parental leave ended, and then I was like, which direction am I going to take? And ultimately, I've just kind of done both, just kind of going down both these paths at the same time.
But you were, when you started that, were you practicing? Were you practicing? Were you in the program remotely, or were you physically in Calgary?
Oh no, it was remotely,
Okay, it's all
and most
remote.
of the University of Calgary, this program is kind of it's designed around professionals to continuing kind of their practice because the people it seems as though they want to be part of the program are people that are working within practice, so it's understood that they kind of have to just keep running their
Now,
practice.
and that was
Um,
actually another question that I had. It was like, what are the prerequisites to be able to apply and get into the program?
Right. Yeah. They say, I think it's 10 years of practice. They,
Okay.
they, they hope, but they can make modifications based on your level of academic background and the strength of your research that they think they would provide for it. But it
Yeah.
is in some ways an expedited program in comparison to other PhD programs because PhDs a lot of the times, although you come in, let's say you're doing one in biology, you're coming in from a master's in biology, but a lot of the first few years you're spending gaining knowledge around specifically what you want to test or what you want to study. Whereas it's understood in the Doctor of Design at University of Calgary that you're coming in with a large, with 10 years of working knowledge. You know a lot about the subject matter that you
Right.
propose to study. So the first 2 years of knowledge gain is kind of skipped over a little bit. And that's why you have a little more freedom to work remotely and work at your own pace as opposed to it being a very regimented thing like the first year or two of most PhD programs are, but after that you're kind of on your own in the same way.
Got it.
uh, so yeah, I guess that's kind of where I am with that stuff.
And so yeah, so you're 2 years into that program now, and
That's right.
you're in year four of the Dow program.
That's right. Yeah, around that 3 or 4. I took a year off, like I said,
Yeah.
when my second son was
Right.
born.
Yeah. Sorry. Right.
Yeah, so I mean, it's been a slow kind of gradual
Yeah.
climb on that one, but it's standing back from the two. It's like they each have their own benefit. I feel like as far as fulfillment of kind of this intellectual desire, I suppose, or to feel like the things that I'm doing in architecture are of value. But I mean, there's a lot of dead ends, a lot of renegotiations, a lot of rethinking. I'm sure it's true of any upper level research project, but it's figuring out a path and figuring out what you ultimately want to get out of it. But it has been very rewarding, I feel like, for myself, but also for the work that we do. and being able to stand behind the things we say, that we feel like there is some sort of empirical work that's being done to try
Right.
to substantiate the things we're saying.
And so, and are you utilizing a current project for the research in this?
Yes, I am. I'm using kind of the body of knowledge. I mean, I shouldn't say body of knowledge, the body of work we've been producing over the last 10 years. And I mean, for a lot of it, it was just retroactively looking back and looking at the work we've done and saying, this is what we thought we were doing and accomplishing.
Right.
And how well did we actually accomplish this? How successful were we in certain areas? And the other side of a lot of what I've been doing now is doing what we're doing right now, but in the opposite way, talking to a lot of interviewing academics, theorists, natural scientists, a lot of different disciplines, and kind of trying to gain a fundamental knowledge base of, what knowledge is out there and what are people doing that are doing this kind of work at a really high level. Like what are their practices that are different that's enabling them to achieve these things.
It was so it's interesting. You're saying this, we collect so much information through our projects, so much
Yeah.
information, right?
Mhm.
Everywhere. And what happens with that information? A lot of it dies, right?
I know I mean, that's a bit of a rant that I could go on, and why not?
Well,
I feel like in our profession we have a major problem with knowledge not being shared and knowledge not being published somewhere. In most disciplines,
yeah,
like growing within your discipline and getting more, being at a higher stature in your profession is dependent on generating knowledge
and
and sharing
sharing it.
knowledge.
Yeah,
Yeah. And that's what
publishing journals in
ex-
medicine and in
exactly.
biology and science,
Exactly.
like all of it, like that is the whole concept of it. Whereas in
Yeah,
this industry, it's insular and the
it is.
information becomes something that you utilize as like a differentiator.
Well, that's exactly it. It becomes competition. It's like you spend, let's say you do a project and you figure out something about a facade or an envelope that's really, cutting edge, or you invested a lot of energy and work into it. Maybe you've even put your own funds and research into it and not just clients thing.
Yeah.
Then it becomes your proprietary knowledge, right? It's what gives you an edge against your competitor.
Yeah.
And in this competitive nature that's so, deeply rooted in our profession, we don't share it. We share it because it gives us an edge on the next RFP or whatever it is. And ultimately, all it's doing is hurting the environment. It's hurting our profession, I think, in a lot of ways. Like our only metric in under trying to understand how well we are progressing as designers when it comes to solving these major crises we have on our hands, biodiversity or the environment, is these point-based systems like lead and passive house that are very
Well,
they're very they're very narrow in the scope of information that gets put into them. They're about thermal envelopes and they're about, energy efficiency, but they don't branch much further than that. And that's the only measure we have to really gauge our level of success in our profession. For instance, like you could clear cut 2 acres and put a passive house on it, and you'd be applauded with, you've done a fantastic job. When that's obviously not true. It's not true. But it's like I look at other disciplines now that I'm, engaged so deeply in how other professions research, because I've been forced into interdisciplinary very nature, is like looking at how other disciplines compare knowledge and record knowledge. And I'm like, we don't do that at all. Like we don't in our profession, we just don't have, like, we have a few journals, they're there, but a lot of it is just combining knowledge from other disciplines and saying this is, you know, urban ecology, which is like it's like some information from ecologists, some information from but like, where's our true disciplinary knowledge? I'm not saying it doesn't exist. I'm just saying it happens much more rarely, like
yeah. So
much than other disciplines that focus so heavily on sharing knowledge. And that's the rubric by which you define success in your profession. Whereas the rubric for success in our profession, and I hate to say it, is competitions. Like these
so let me ask you
award
a question.
programs that are just endless these days.
Let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
This is such the whole podcast is centered around a very open dialogue. Okay.
Hmm.
And the purpose for that was that there was no opportunity to prepare. I don't like personally, I don't like to prepare questions because I feel like when you prepare questions in many ways, it leads someone down a path that doesn't allow for a natural progression of conversation. So I'm saying that because based on everything you've just said,
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
if there was an opportunity to be able to share information and we worked on creating something like that, not you, maybe, but like I know you're busy.
Yeah.
If we, Walden and some other people were involved in something that allowed us to be able to share information in an open forum,
Uh-huh.
is that something that you think that people would participate in?
I feel like they would only if there was some sort of benefit in doing so.
In
Um,
anonymity.
yeah, well, yeah, maybe, and maybe being anonymous in it as well. But you have to share it anonymously. I don't know. I like that's. I feel like it's something that's rooted in our profession that we don't share.
So, because I'm saying this because now that I'm saying this to you, I guess I'm saying it to everybody else that's listening. But this is something that we are looking to essentially roll out
Right.
to be able to gather information from those that have participated in this podcast and that
Yeah.
continue to participate in this podcast
Yeah.
and start to be able to gather information anonymously for those that want
Yeah.
to participate and disseminate that information anonymously to help the
Yeah.
profession grow.
Yeah.
That is
I
something that we are literally right now working on.
I think it's a fantastic idea, and I really hope it gets traction because I think it's an important thing. I think it's important for our profession to grow. And I can say, circling back to the DDES thing,
Yeah.
I was giving a symposium the other day where I was talking at the end of the semester, and we had some really great critics there. And you know how when you sit in critiques, good critics are always looking for the string or the thread that ties all these things together, different projects. And one of the threads that continuously comes up in almost every project is opening the profession up, making it more diverse and having more voices. These, like, I find it as old ideals. And part of the reason that I went into upper level education research is that perpetuating old ideas seems to be the norm in our profession. And as if, I've heard many older professors say this is just how it is. This is just the canon of architecture. We didn't create it. This is just how it is. And when you have an urban setting, you put the buildings all against the street. And it's like, yeah, I mean, that's not progress. And that's also not looking at the world that we're living in now. We're like we have a lot of problems, and our populations are much larger than they were when modernism was at its height. We have a lot of other problems that we're dealing with, and those solutions don't apply to today. So don't tell me that we can just keep teaching the same stuff. Some of it is applicable, but there's also huge gaps in information, and we need to open up our profession and invite other disciplines to be part of the discussions. And it's not just the environment; it's also in contracts. And there's just in every project, it just seems like everybody wants to somehow bring more information into the profession and diversify it. And I think you're right. I mean, we need some sort of platform to utilize that to be the catalyst through
Yeah.
which we can, speak, I
It starts
suppose.
with a basic question, how many people are at your practice? And how many
Yeah.
projects do you take on? Like something as basic as that,
Oh, yeah, yeah.
right? Just to get the water moving in a certain
Yeah.
direction, start you got to get the current going.
That I think that's yeah. I mean, there was one thing that like Elsa Lam, Canadian architect,
Yeah.
had put out. I forget the exact name of it, but like a benchmark of architectural practice. And I love leafing through that just to see like how much do people invest in payroll? How much do just knowing that information because we don't share that stuff. We don't know.
We're gonna work on
Like,
it. I'm
yeah,
telling you.
yeah,
We talk because we do a brainstorming session on a fairly regular basis, Bruce and I, and we were talking through like and I talked to some other practices here. I'm like, what do you want to know about another practice? I
mm,
could find
mm,
it out and it's anonymous and we could share it. Are you in? And I've had a bunch of people say, oh yeah, I would love to, you know,
yeah,
fees, scale of practice, anyhow. Yeah, yeah.
Definitely that kind of stuff, like the actual profession, like the practice information, that would be incredibly helpful to have access to that information because I think it makes it more, you can structure your practice better when you know what everyone else is kind of doing instead of it's very much like very closed down as far as, like I don't even know what the other firms that I compete against are charging. So yeah,
Right. So
yeah.
wouldn't it be, and I say this because when we pitch our services as a construction management, a project management company, I
Mm,
explain to a client, I'm like, look, everyone in our echelon, if you're talking to this tier, we're all the same price point. We're
right.
all the same price point. So it just comes down to the merit of the people that you're talking to, and do you connect with them? And does
Right.
the process that they have in place for construction and how they collaborate and how they communicate, does that align with what your values are? And
Yeah.
so wouldn't it be amazing to be able to have some idea of knowledge on the other side of that for the with architect? Yeah, like architecture practices don't know it. Some
No.
builders, like we'll talk to each other every now and again. Uh,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
if
I,
so, yeah. All right. Well, good.
yeah. No, and I think it helps everyone. Yeah, I really do. Like it's only a win-win for everyone to have access to that knowledge.
Totally.
Yeah,
Yeah,
there's
because if you're all going to go and speak to the same client, now like at least the client can pick someone based on who they connect with and a
yeah.
process that matters. And it doesn't come down to the fickle elements of like, well, if they're going to charge me 3 or 4% more, or it's going to cost me $100,000 more to go work with this guy than that guy. I want to work with them, but I can't. I just can't justify that cost. And like that's what so much of what we do in this industry is based on cost.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Mm-hmm.
all cost oriented, and you so then you lose the ability to look at the things that you're trying to investigate here, and
Yeah.
what is the
Yeah.
impact on the land, and how are we going to work with, what type of materials are we going to work with, like,
Exactly. Yeah.
because
Yeah.
that's what matters.
I mean, it really does. It really does. At the end of the day, that stuff is incredibly important, and it takes a backseat to a lot of other things. A
Yeah.
lot of things. Yeah.
So on that topic, I'm curious to know, like, in when you're looking at your projects, are you always evaluating something that how this project's going to impact the physical space that it's going to be planted on?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's always kind of been there, but it's kind of amped up a lot in the last few years. We're like really trying to get down to the nitty-gritty of like what are the things that are most impactful and why can't we reach them and what's driving it's as we see population growth, urban density makes a lot of sense. It's the area around the city, like that we call it the peri-urban, that acts kind of as a filter. And if it's a hard wall of slashing and burning and nothing left, it's difficult for ecosystems and stuff to thrive within the urban core. And I mean, I know they're different than intact indigenous ecosystems, but they still exist. And I find a lot of urban growth. I feel like right now we're repeating the urban sprawl post World War II of just we need so much housing, we need it so quickly, so there's no rules. It's just how fast can we do it? And the little fishing town where my studio was, I mean, I still have a property out there and we spend a lot of time out there. My shop's out there where we build all our models and stuff. But it's just we see this coming through where it's like, what's the cheapest way to approach the landscape? And it's to like cut everything down, just like completely slash and burn, and then put a little, cookie cutter in the middle of it and plant some grass and put a couple token shrubs in, and then we have, then we're done. And it's like, how does that become the norm of our relationship to like how we build? And like unless we question it, it's just going to continue and it's only going to amp up more and more. So, I mean, a lot of the questions I have are around like in an ideal situation where I have clients who say, I love this land. I purchased it because it's, this is where I want to spend the rest of my days. I want to touch as little as possible. I want to leave everything intact. And we approach it with, usually clients who have financial means and desire to do it. And we still come up short. Like we still feel like, no, that's a lot more impactful than we hoped it was. Half the site is gone. And they're like, we had everything on our side and we still feel like we failed. So it's like when nobody cares, what's gonna, like then it's, you're doomed from go. So I mean, I think a lot of what I've been doing lately is being very insular. It's like, well, the best we can do is try to be a good, example to others. Maybe that's the thing. Like, can we really, really amp up the way we do things and do it in a very thoughtful way and a very systematic way? And hopefully there's a trickle down that some other people. But I think in a lot of ways, you go into these things with like, I'm going to save the world. Like, I got to figure out how I'm going to save urbanity and change the way we build. It's a like as an architect, it's not an architectural problem. It's much bigger than that.
Yeah.
Like it's a humanity problem. So like what can I do as an architect and as an inquisitive naturalist to do these things? And I think you just focus on your own work and do what you can within your own practices and hope that it can inspire others to do the same, I
Right.
suppose.
Do you get excited about like some regions more than others?
You mean regions like places to build kind of
Yeah.
things?
Yeah, like if someone's coming to you and they're like, "Look, I got a property in this area," and I know that you like a lot of your work is in Nova Scotia.
Yeah.
Is there
Yeah.
are there certain areas that you're more drawn to than others, or is there are there other areas that you want to reach that you haven't yet reached?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, you're right. A lot of our work, our clients own properties in Nova Scotia, and Nova Scotia is wonderful. Like, I really love this place. There's
Yeah.
just like a natural rugged beauty to Nova Scotia, but we're doing more and more projects in Ontario, and I grew up in Ontario, Northern
Yeah.
Ontario. I had the opportunity to speak about this topic in an interview I did just recently with James Cutler, not to name drop here,
It's
but
okay.
he does this work really well, and he's
Shout
there's
out to
like
James.
yeah. It depends where you are. Like I think you owe it to every place you build. And in his case, it's all over the US, it's in Hawaii, it's in, all over the world. And each time you go to a new place, you owe it to the place and to the project to try to understand not just, the social and the cultural and but also understand the landscape that you're working with. I always apply everything I think about to Nova Scotia just intuitively because I understand, a lot of our work is in these like yeah, the barren lands along Nova Scotia coast, the heathlands they're called, and this patchwork of coastal boreal forests, and it just feels like everything we do is kind of catered and tailored to that type of landscape. But when we kind of shake that off and go to other places, it's hard not to like default back to what you understand because like asking those questions, same say to James Cutler, he's like, well, it depends. It depends if are you in a desert? Are you in, it, and it's like, it's very eye-opening when, because our borders of the work we're doing is starting to expand and like, wow, yeah, you really need to be very astute to be able to do the research, try to understand the place at a pretty high level if you're going to be able to do things that you feel like are not overly aggressive or domineering or but yeah, I guess it's the pursuit of knowledge all the time. I guess that's the answer is being open to learning in every scenario you're in.
And it kind of goes back to what I was saying before. Like, wouldn't it be amazing if there was this network of people where we could connect people? And if someone from out of region was going to now design something within the proximity of where you drive every day, and you're going to have to go look at this thing all the time, wouldn't it be amazing to be able to connect you so that you can connect them to the right people to get this thing done properly? You know,
Yeah,
that
exactly.
exchange of information again, like, where's we gotta create this journal.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think it's long past due. It'd be great. It would be great to start to, share information. I mean, we need to. I mean, it's fundamental. And I mean, the way we teach architecture needs to change too.
Yeah.
Uh, I, I'm really passionate about the architecture. I mean, the education of architecture. I haven't been doing it in a while because I've been back to being a student. My wife kind of gave me the ultimatum. It's like student or you
Yeah.
can't do
Yeah.
both,
Remember, you said that. You
which
said
is understandable. But the education of architecture, I think, is so critical. And I don't want to say it's all awful. And no, it's not. but I just feel like there's a lot of room for development and there's a lot of room for
Revisions.
revisions. Yeah. It's
A new set of drawings.
yeah, a new set of
MSIs.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, we need some slight information. Like, yeah.
Okay. And I guess another question I was curious about, having come from being a carpenter and now
Yeah.
and still being involved in the tangibility, if that actually is the word, uh,
Yeah.
but I'll go with it. In wood, I know that wood plays a big part of what you like to utilize
Yeah.
as a material. So, are there certain species of wood that you really like to work with?
Yeah, I suppose. I mean, I prefer to work with what's at hand. I mean, and what is easy to get for us is hemlock and spruce. Like when you go to a lumber yard, it's SPF, spruce, pine, fir. Fir we don't really have here. Well, we do, but it's not like the West Coast where fir is, you use almost everything I built in Vancouver is out of fir. And I
Right.
got to the East Coast and I realized, oh, we don't really have
Have
fir
it.
here. It's extraordinarily expensive. So, spruce and pine, we have a ton of it. And hemlock, we really like using hemlock because hemlock, similar to cedar, has like innate qualities that prevent, the breakdown of it in outside. It weathers really well as opposed to, spruce and pine do okay, but not nearly as well as hemlock and cedar. And the beauty of hemlock is it also has structural capacity, whereas cedar is a little softer. As far as
That is,
framing and cladding and stuff, those are our repertoire, I would say. Sorry, were you gonna say something there?
I was just saying, I know, I was just saying that pine's also one of those softwoods.
Yeah, yeah. We don't use pine that much unless it just comes from the lumberyard. You can never really know when you get SPF like what what it is specifically when you take it off the lift. But a lot of our wood, more and more, even with framing wood, we've been getting from local mills. There's one in New Brunswick, Ridge Cedar. Shout out to Ridge Cedar. That is, I don't know how they make a profit. I don't know how they make a living, and maybe it's just because the markup on wood at the lumberyard is so significant. Maybe that's got to be it. But it's so economical to buy it just right from the mill. And there's just like, getting rough sawn lumber, there's just something so nostalgically beautiful about it. Like it's fun. It's fun to work with wood that just came from a mill
Yeah.
and has been planed with the, 1/8 inch round over. And, it's like a true dimension lumber. More and more we've been using it in our work. And I enjoy working with it as opposed to the highly processed stuff we get at the big box stores.
Right.
Uh,
And
you do go
what do you
ahead.
use for your models?
Most of our model bases are maple, just because to get a hard, sharp edge on wood that, at that scale, when you're at 1/100th or smaller, soft woods don't really hold a sharp edge as well as hardwoods. And we really like either birch or maple just because they're like a medium tone. You don't get over focused on the grain of the wood. It's about the form of the building and how it meets the land. And for the actual buildings themselves, that's what we build our bases out of usually. But for the buildings, it's basswood, which again, I mean, it's very soft, but balsa wood is the only other one you usually get at the model stores. And balsa wood, it doesn't hold a sharp edge, whereas bass holds a really good sharp edge. So it's mainly bass and maple we use for our models. And I mean, we still, contrary to, a lot of the people in the profession, we really find that building things physically, there's something about it. It's captivating for clients. They love seeing a little miniature they're building. And quite honestly, we find when our students are building the models, we figure out so much about the building that we wouldn't have digitally. A lot of conditions that we're like, huh, what are we going to do there? And I don't know why that is. I don't know why, because I think you can skip over things in
Well,
in in digital models. You
yeah,
don't.
when you're touching something, it is completely
Yeah,
than when
yeah,
you're looking at it visually, right?
yeah, yeah. It's something different, and I think digital models are it's a two-dimensional screen of a three-dimensional object, whereas an actual three-dimensional object, there's something different about it. It really helps you to understand the scale of things and figure out conditions that you would maybe skip over or not fully resolve in the digital world.
So
Yeah.
funny. So as you're saying all of this, you know what? My mind keeps going back to this concept that you had talked about, and talking with, the impact and what you were talking about in your continued education and doing these studies. You just think of children,
Yeah.
and okay, like anyone out there that has had kids or has observed kids, and this is probably, I'm hoping that I've just touched on everyone that's potentially listening to this.
Yeah.
But when you think about which the way that children interact with objects, most kids are going to want to interact with something that is three-dimensional versus two-dimensional.
Yeah.
Unless you introduce the two-dimensional object on an ongoing basis, in which case they become fascinated with that screen. But
Yeah.
most of
Yeah.
the time,
Yeah. Yeah.
kids want to immerse themselves in three-dimensional play. And when
Hmm.
you look at how they interact with, if you give kids like something like Lego, they're going to want to start building and figuring something out.
Hmm.
I think that a
Hmm.
lot of the research that happens at these schools should be actually based on when you're looking at like what's going to get constructed. Like go research a bunch of kids. Go throw a whole bunch of small little
Hmm.
pieces of wood together and see what they're going to go build. Give them some,
Yeah. No, it is true.
because
It is.
we're just taught on like a circular basis that having a really nice piece of stone is what you need when you don't.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
don't need it.
Yeah.
I say that with access because I've got like, two guitars here. I probably only need one, but anyhow.
Yeah. Yeah.
But this is what we are taught. We are just taught to continually want to have more and
Yeah.
and and stretch beyond what is really necessary and fulfills us. Nonetheless, that was a long tangent of things that I probably should let go of. But
No, no, I think I mean, that goes back to a lot of the work that we do is where it's almost all small structures. We feel insecure when people have like 3,000 square foot homes. It's like,
we
is
built
that
a
too?
lot of them. In fairness, like
Yeah, yeah.
we've got multiple projects over 10,000 square feet. Like
Wow. Wow. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, most of our work is 1,000, 1,500, 2,000 is like the max. Once in a blue moon, like we've done a few houses that are 3,000 and above, but the vast majority of it is just small structures. And it comes back to what you were just saying, which is you don't need all that. A lot of it is I mean, unnecessary things that we fill our life with these things that we think we need, but you really don't. Yeah. I mean, sometimes it's educating clients around what do you actually need and what do you actually want, like it's a tough one when it comes down to like, people have a budget and they have wants and needs. And, we always say our job as the architect is to find the sweet spot of those
yeah,
two, the amount you want to pay and what you want, they have to resolve themselves at one point, and that ends up being your project. But it's interesting when you say there's a lot of things that equal the budget, and one of the major drivers is the size. And that seems to be the hardest one for people. Like they're willing to, a lot of people come in with these, wants and needs of I want to be passive house, I want solar, I want a solar field, I want this, I want a geothermal well, I want a certain size. But for whatever reason, the first thing to go is sustainable systems. They usually bend on that right away. Thermal envelope takes I find a pretty close second to that. But size tends to be something that's a harder sale to say, just make it smaller. Just have us 1,500 square foot, then you can have all this amazing gadgetry and you can have, but it seems to be, I find, a bit of a battle to get people to build smaller. When that I feel like there's as much value in building smaller and building thoughtfully on the landscape as there is in building what we call sustainably, which is when we think of sustainability in architecture, you think of systems, gadgets, mechanical systems, things. But I feel like our carbon footprint could be decreased by just building smaller and building smarter. Like, just don't. I mean, it's the
that
same
goes,
argument you hear all the time about like plastic. It's
no,
like
but that goes back to
we
your
can
application.
recycle it. We can do, and it's like, well, we just have to stop using it. Like that's the kicker. It's like it's quite simple. Like, just what do you need, and do it thoughtfully, and then your footprint is quite small.
Right.
It's just when you have massive mansions, you really have to be a lot more conscious about the amount of energy it takes to heat them, right?
Well, and you need furniture because you don't want to have empty rooms.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, exactly. You need
And you
more
need
things to put
gotta
in your
gotta
big
put up
thing.
some art. And look, I mean, admittedly, I understand why some people want it. I mean, some people want because they want to have be able to have they want to host their extended family, and they do that on a
Sure.
regular,
Yeah,
ongoing basis. And in those scenarios, like I can understand it and I can appreciate it. But there are others where it's not the case, and they just want it because they can. Which,
yeah,
oh, look, to each their own. But from a
exactly.
mass scale, anyhow.
Yeah, yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think it's not really a problem of like, yeah, we can have mansions and that kind of thing. It's just we just have way more people on this earth than we used to. And it's like,
Yes.
if everyone has a mansion, we're in trouble. I
I mean,
mean,
if we could also start with just holding the door for each other and saying thanks, please and thank you,
yeah,
that would be a great start.
yeah.
In traffic, letting someone in. These are like
Yeah.
some, and then saying thank you, thank you.
Yeah.
Those are some things that we could implement. Okay, let's throw that all to the side. Let's go back to the practice. What are some of the roles within the practice that you've established, and have you established newer roles in the last few years than what you had when you initially started in the first five that you really now put a high value on because you realized you needed them?
Yeah, yeah, I would say it's been an evolution,
Yeah,
like, and it still is because we're constantly evolving the practice. Although I like to think right now we're settling into a place that we might kind of stay for a while. But I mean, at the beginning of the practice, it was almost all construction. I was always on site,
yeah,
and it was a struggle to have people like doing the books and sending out invoices and stuff like that. For the last 5 years, I would say it's been a division of we have an on-site team that
yep,
has a leader and we have an in-office team, but the unique role that is kind of unique to our firm, I think in a lot of ways, is having a project manager, architecture lead,
yeah.
that also acts as a site, not a site foreman, but a site manager,
Okay.
in that they have to understand all the materials that are being used on site, order the materials, make sure they're on site, doing the construction scheduling, what site is each person going to and when. So it's basically having a project manager, construction project manager, and an architecture
Yeah. On site.
same person.
Yeah.
And those are difficult roles
I was gonna
to
say, like
find people that fit that role.
that is a demanding role.
Yeah, it
Oof.
really is. And it kind of stresses out co-op students when they come in and they see like, or we have two that kind of do that role right now, as well as myself. I just kind of float around, but it's like, how do they know so much about construction? How do they like that? It feels very intimidating because they know such a large amount of information. But I wouldn't say there's like Lucian, who sits just across from where I'm sitting right now. He came from the trades, like he was a carpenter. He was trained as a carpenter, and then he went to architecture school, similar to myself. Whereas Abby, who does it, she did the opposite, where she came into the office from an architectural standpoint and has learned construction on the job. So I wouldn't say you have to be a builder, like you have to at some point like swing a hammer to be able to understand construction. It is helpful, but it takes longer to train people for that role. And you
Yeah.
can't just say, "Oh, they want to leave that firm. We'll just put them in that position here," because it's a hybrid position.
Well, and I feel like you could also burn out in that position
Yeah, yeah,
if you're not really good at being able to figure out your time management.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Like the time management of that role is so vital.
It is. Yeah, we have a lot of Gantt charts that get updated a lot. Yeah, to try yeah. But I
And
mean, it's also
retroactively is different than proactively.
yeah, 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 that's true. Yeah. That's true. That's true. Yeah. I mean, and it's also I kind of say it as tongue in cheek, but I kind of mean it, is like when you're the architect and the builder, then you got no one left to blame. You can't
That's why I
like
said that there could be burnout is because like
yeah, yeah,
you've
yeah,
got like the weight of this whole thing on top of you. But at
yeah,
the same time, if that project flourishes,
yeah,
the volume of appreciation that you can have for yourself and also from the team
yeah,
is
yeah,
like it's stupendous. Like that you just start to, yeah, I'm assuming that you would have some people that can just fly if
yeah,
they if,
yeah.
as they take that on.
Yeah, no, yeah, it's incredibly valuable. It's funny, it's the same way as like almost any, it's like the pain of going through things like that is so stressful. So when you get on the other side, it's like you do feel a huge amount of pride in it. And I found a project we just finished, Patty's Head, our project manager, Abby, it was like the whole time it was like drudgery. And then once you get on the other side, it's like it is a huge amount of yeah, it's a rewarding process. It is rewarding on the other side to know that we did such a humongous, like it was all us. We did everything from beginning to end. There wasn't, it wasn't we did the drawings and someone picked it up. It's just
Yeah.
we did it from the first client consultation to the end. And I think that leads us back to like the research aspect of it, where it's like, oh, we screwed up with this project because the builder didn't get what we were trying to do, or what. It's like it's all us. We wear it all.
Yeah.
So any shortcomings on site, we can draw it back to something that we do and something that we could revise and
I
change
still,
as moving
I
forward.
will say, man, I think it's madness. It's like it's so wild to like to hold all of that weight. It's like I'm so happy that when I started, we don't do it anymore. I'm so happy.
Oh, yeah. I would say, yeah, I would say
It's
the
so
development of
heavy.
it is we have got a lot of new projects lately, and we're focusing more on architecture than we
Yeah.
have in the past. I
Yeah.
always say it's funny that we've done fairly successfully. We've been fairly successful with architecture. I was saying to Lucian the other day, and it's like we were hardly even architects. Like we were always on site. I mean, maybe it was a one-to-one model for us, but like compared to the amount of time we have these days to be like, I'm in the studio a lot drawing these days, and because we have some
Great.
larger projects where I need to be an architect.
And you were talking
And
about wanting to do that.
finally, like
One.
I'm becoming an architect. I feel like where I actually have the time to consider the things I do and just not like you just said, being reactionary. It's like this is my instinct to put the window like this or do this like that. Let's just do that and carry on. Whereas now there's a lot more studying and thinking and considering and I'm not that old, but I feel older than I am
You,
because it's like the
feel the
last
pull?
10, 12 years have been very, very taxing. You
Yes.
got a lot of different roles, and it is nice to settle in a little bit more into the architecture profession. And I would say the knowledge we have gained as builders and being able to build has paid us dividends going forward,
Oh
because
yeah.
a lot of the clients we get now, like the reason we get the job isn't necessarily that we'll build it for you. It's more so that we can talk
Yeah.
builder
Yeah.
because we're builders. And I think a lot of the contractors we deal with are like, oh wow, they actually know what they're talking about. We had a builder say to us the other day, which we wear as a badge of honor, is your drawings actually make sense. I might have said that in the last one, but yeah,
Okay.
the builder was like, yeah, no, no, they're architects, but trust me, their drawings actually make sense. I was like, yeah, I take that as that's like
That's
we
enough.
appreciate that.
Do you look at any like minimums when you're looking at requirements for when you're hiring? Are you looking at like, if it's on the carpenter team, like are you looking for ideally like a red seal carpenter, or if it's in design, are you looking for like specific amount of knowledge that they've gained from a certain university or
Yeah, I mean, I feel like no.
okay.
A lot of our staff have. I mean, my close relationship with Dalhousie School of Architecture, we have a co-op program there.
Yep.
So they do in the bachelor's they do a one semester, and in the master's they do a two semester. I would say the vast majority of our management team came through that program. Like they
Right.
came as students, and then we took them back again, and we took them back after school, and eventually they worked their way up. We're very much growing from within. It's very rare. We did admittedly, like it was about 6 months ago. We're like, no, this is the first time ever we're gonna try to hire somebody with a high level of experience and skill set, and they're gonna make a change in the way we do things. Where it's not, they're not coming and learning everything from us. We want to bring in outside knowledge so they can
Yeah.
actually change the way. And it all kind of fell through. Like it was like, yeah, like our wages in Nova Scotia didn't align with, American schools or whatever. And in the end, we're like, let's just get a Dal grad. And it's fantastic. We're so happy with our hire. Asma, she's been great. And we're like, nah, maybe this is just how we do it.
Yeah.
They just grow from within. We have another one of our staff, Abby, is going on maternity leave soon, and Jam's going to take her place. And he's been fantastic. He started as a carpenter, and then he went to architecture school. But he came first work term, second work term, and now he's coming back after school. So yeah, it's actually it's never happened before that we've hired anyone from outside our little Halifax community that I can think of. Like I think everyone's been either a Dal grad or a carpenter from Halifax. I mean, oh, there was one guy. We hired one individual once from BC, and he was great, but he moved on to big timber.
Yeah.
He's an architect as well, but he worked for Spearhead, which is like a big fabrication company in, no, I wouldn't say they're big, but they do very complicated projects for like the Pat Cows and Olsen Kundig and stuff. They're out of Vancouver, and he was fantastic, but he got poached by a big timber operation to go and like rejig their whole operation. He was overqualified for our team, I'll say.
Got him on. We had him on. We got him.
Yeah, we had them, but yeah, and then 90% it's yeah, they learn by just working with us for
Yeah.
4 or 5 years or whatever it is, and it seemed to work for us so far. Who knows if that'll change in the future, but
Yeah.
right now we tend to like doing that, just building relationship with a student over a number of years, and eventually they're running the show.
So I think my last question I'm going to ask you, given your ongoing need for continued education and some of the conversation that we've had so far, I'm just contemplating, like, are you thinking ever of putting this all into a book? Have you thought about that at all?
Yeah, I have. It's funny with books. It's like you never feel like. I think it's one of those things when you're growing up, you look at your parents as being so intelligent. Like I think for a lot of years I was like, I can't have a kid. I'm not
What do I
smart
know?
enough, and I don't know enough things. What am I gonna? I feel like that kind of about a book is like, when do you feel like like I feel like education's an ongoing thing for me. Like I just feel like I was telling my wife this the other day. It's like intellectual stimulation is like something that I require when I realized the other day that it's only been like 2 years in my adult life I haven't been teaching or learning in university. Like I've been there it's like 20 years, like, and it's such an integral part of the way I am that I just don't I I worry that I'd put a book out and then like 2 days later I'd be like, I feel differently about that because I've learned something new. But I think there is value in, and I think everyone does that. I would say you write a book and your ideas changes, and that's okay. It's like a snapshot of what you feel like and you think at that time. But yes, to answer your question, that was a long-winded way of saying I'm hoping to,
You're
when I'm
working
done.
it through. You're working through the answer. No, you have to apologize.
Yeah, is to share the information, and I think I will revert it back to my conversation with James Cutler a little while ago. He said he's an old guy. He said that a few times, and he's like, I feel like I'm at a point in my life where I have a responsibility to share all the knowledge I've learned. And he's thinking about like, how do I do that? Like we do monographs. I have a monograph that just came out, and it's more so just about the work and what, it's like a show and tell. It's not like it doesn't get into the nitty gritty of why you do things and things. And so he said he was doing like YouTube channel. His staff has talked him into it, where he's going to do not a show and tell, but a how to of different things he does. And I'm like, that's great. And it kind of got me thinking, like, I do want to at some point, when I'm on the other side of these degrees I'm working on, just take a year and just write down what I've learned and what I think about and share it as a book. But I also think there's value in, when people do doctorate degrees, there's either the monograph where it's like you put out a 300-page thing of all the information you've learned, or you do a bunch of short journals that you publish along the way. And I wonder, like, maybe there's value in, I feel like our profession has a need for just writing journals,
Yeah.
short snippets of
Volume
information,
one, volume
database.
two, volume three,
Yeah,
adding
exactly.
to. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, so I don't know. I think anyone who does research has a responsibility to share that knowledge, because there's investment from someone, your family or your other practitioners or your staff.
Yep.
They've all helped you to allow you to have time to do that. And I think it's a place of luxury to be able to learn and to have time to learn. And I think the other side of it is it's a requirement to share what you've learned and share the knowledge that you've gained. So I don't know what exactly the format will be. It probably will be a book because of my love of books. I really love books, but I'm not sure exactly what it is or when it'll be, but there definitely will be some form of, sharing the information.
Please don't hate me when I say this, but if you're going to incorporate any images, you should allow those images to be black and white and allow kids to color in it. So it becomes an integrated project.
Yeah.
Like the adults can read it, but the kids can draw on it.
Yeah.
Just saying.
Yeah. I remember I was telling my staff this the other day when I was doing my undergrad, there was a master's student that decided to do his entire thesis with crayon. And the professors were like, you'll quit, you won't do it, you won't follow through. But he actually did. He just in a very childlike way rendered all his drawings in crayon.
I have seen some like professional drawings done with crayon. It is incredible.
Yeah. It's fun. I guess they're not that different from like an oil pastel. Like it shouldn't be that amazing. It's just we relate crayons with, child drawings.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah.
Peter, it has been so much fun chatting with you. Thanks for taking the time the second time and the first time. Really enlightening. What an amazing dialogue. I feel like we had this. It was first time, yes, but like second time. And we challenged some things here.
Yeah.
So
good to do, yeah.
Thank you for the candor, and thank you for the time, and thank you for being you.
Thanks, man. Thanks. I really appreciate it. And it's a lot of fun. It's a really good thing you guys are doing. And I look forward to hearing more about the knowledge sharing aspect of it. But yeah.
There's a reason we called it Behind the Build.
Yeah, yeah. Fantastic. Yeah. It was a lot of fun. Yeah.
Thanks.